In this video, I'd like to show how we can connect our GitHub account into our FactoryTalk Optix Studio. We can use GitHub to be a remote repository to store and collaborate and share our optics projects with our other team members that can all work on a project kind of simultaneously. So to do this, we're going to have to first make sure we have a GitHub account. So if you don't have a GitHub account, you can go to github.com and create an account. It's free to do that. Once you create an account, then you'll have to create a repository inside of GitHub. And we'll do that in just a minute. But first, let's create an optics project. I want to first show that before we start creating an optics project, you do have to link your GitHub account into Optix Studio. So to do that, we're going to go to the settings. We'll go to FactoryTalk Optix Studio options. We'll go to version control. We'll have to enter our username and our email address for our GitHub account. And then we have two options right now available to us for version control providers. One is GitHub and one is GitLab. GitHub is basically the cloud-based version, and GitLab would be an on-prem version of GitHub. I'm going to use GitHub, which is going to be our cloud-based. So I would choose GitHub, and then I would enter my username and password credentials, and then it would validate the connection, and then we're connected in the GitHub. So once I've done that, I can now come in here and create a project. I'm going to go ahead and say default project. And we'll say just the default resolution is good for right now. I want to say that to use GitHub and to directly connect your GitHub account into Optix Studio, we do have to have the Pro subscription license for Optix. So there are two versions of the Studio. There's the standard version, which is completely free, unlicensed. You can download it and use it without any licensing. And there's a Pro subscription version, which gives us the ability to directly connect into a GitHub remote repository, as well as to be able to use the cloud-based version of Optix Studio. Now, if you don't have a Pro subscription license, you can always go to the GitHub repository. You can always download the repository manually, and you can always open that downloaded project into Studio. And then if you want to push it back into GitHub, then it would be a manual process back, right? You would save your project, and then you can push that change up into GitHub, log into GitHub, and upload the changes. So that's still possible. But with a Pro license, you'll be able to directly push and pull from a remote repository without having to do those manual steps. So I've created a project, and I didn't change the default name, so it's new HMI project. So it's very important that when we go into GitHub, we have to make a repository in GitHub that exactly matches the name of our project here in Optix Studio. They got to be exact matches. So I'm going to go back to GitHub. I'm going to choose my the green new button here, and I'm going to call it basically exactly what the name of the project here. And again, that is new HMI project. New HMI project. So it shows that that is available. After that, if I want to give it a brief description, I can definitely do that. There are two options here as far as making it visible, either public or private. If it's public, well then it's visible to anybody on the internet. If it's private, then only those that I choose to share it with can see it. And the other option here is a checkbox for add a README file. It's very important that you do not check this box. Basically, if you were to create a README file, it'll be with the same name as the FactoryTalk Optix project, and this will cause an issue for FactoryTalk Optix. It will prevent the project from synchronizing properly, so just leave this box unchecked. Very important. Then we're going to choose to create the repository. So now the repository has been made in GitHub. I now have a link, a URL to this repository. I'm going to go ahead and copy this link because I'm going to need it here in just a few moments. We'll come back to Optix Studio and say I've made some edits here. I'm ready to push this to the remote repository. I can now choose, I have these two kind of cloud buttons up here. One is a cloud with the arrow going up, that's push to remote, and then one with a cloud, the arrow going down, that's pull from remote. So basically I'm going to upload to GitHub, and I can download from GitHub to kind of put it in our PLC terminology that we like. But basically pushing to GitHub and then pulling it off the cloud and down into Optix is another option to me. But I'm going to go ahead and push it because I need to push my initial changes here up into the GitHub. So I'm going to choose push to remote. It asks me to give a commit message, which is basically a little bit of a comment as to maybe what this revision is. I might just put it as Rev1. And then it's going to ask me to provide the URL to the remote location, which is the URL that I copied from the repository I just created. I'm going to say OK. Once I do that, it starts to save that project remotely up into GitHub. So it only took a few moments. It's done. If I come back now to GitHub, if I were to click on my new HMI project here, kind of get back to the repository, we'll see that now we have the items, the files from the Optix project stored in my repository. And I have my .optix file, which is the new HMI project.optix, so that's kind of the project there. But there's a few other files that come along too. And then I have my commit message, which I basically have said was Rev1, and shows it as, just being done here a minute ago. So that's it. So if I want to make changes, make any more additional changes, then I can come back and say push to remote, and it would ask me what a commit is. Of course, I didn't make any changes, so it didn't detect any changes, so it didn't ask me to make the commit comments there. If I want to download from the remote repository, well, then I can just basically choose the download button as well, and that will pull it down. Now for this project, it kind of knew that the path to the repository, so it didn't prompt me for that. But if this was a kind of a new project and somebody sent me a link to a GitHub repository to pull from, then it would ask me, it would prompt me, what is the path to the remote repository that you want to download from, and I would enter that path, and it would go and pull it from that path. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but the key is linking your GitHub account as well as creating a repository in GitHub that matches exactly the name of your Optix project, and remembering to not choose to create a README file when you do create that repository.